Henderson stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber and tried not to show her nervousness. The room was massive, far larger than any human building she had ever seen. Above her, the dome showed the stars of 1,000 different systems. Around her, seated in a circle that rose up like the inside of a bowl, were the representatives of 43 alien species. She was the first human to stand here, the first to speak for Earth, the first to ask for membership in a community that had existed for thousands of years before humans even invented the wheel. Honored began, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. I come before you today to request full membership for humanity in the Galactic Council. We have reviewed your laws. We accept your terms. We wish only to join you in peace and cooperation. A sound like grinding stones came from her left, leaned forward in his seat. He was tall and covered in dark green scales. His eyes were yellow and cold. When he spoke, his words came through the translation device in his ear. Peace, said, and his tone made it sound like an insult. Yes, we have studied your species. You speak often of peace. Your entire presentation focuses on trade agreements and cultural exchange. You barely mention your military capabilities. Kept her expression neutral. We believe that diplomacy should come before force. We have learned that war brings only suffering. Learned, laugh was harsh, or feared. We have accessed your public records. Your last major conflict ended nearly a century ago. Since then, you have reduced your military forces considerably. You have dismantled weapons. You have turned soldiers into farmers and engineers. This tells us much about your species. Behind, standing near the entrance as her security escort, Admiral tensed. Did not turn to look at him, but she could feel his anger from across the room. Had been against this approach from the beginning. He had warned her that the Council would misunderstand humanity's choice to pursue peace. Another spoke. This one was a being whose translucent wings caught the light. Her voice was softer than more curious. Ambassador Henderson, your species has an unusual history. Your records show thousands of years of constant warfare, conflict between tribes, between nations, between ideologies. Yet in recent times, this has changed dramatically. Can you explain this transformation? Took a breath. This was the question she had prepared for. We learned what war truly costs. We learned that every battle, no matter how justified it seems, leaves scars that last for generations. We decided that there had to be a better way. So you fear war, said flatly. You fear conflict so much that you have rendered yourselves weak. How can we trust a species that will not fight? What value does humanity bring to this council if you will run from danger? We do not run from danger, said, and for the first time her voice held an edge. We simply prefer to find solutions that do not require bloodshed. Is that not the purpose of this council? To unite different species in cooperation rather than conflict. Waved a clawed hand dismissively. Fine words, but when real threats emerge, will you hide behind those words? Will you expect other species to fight for you while you negotiate? Took a step forward, held up her hand without turning, stopping him. She knew what he wanted to say. She knew what he wanted to tell these aliens who thought they understood humanity. But this was not the time. Not yet. We will defend ourselves if necessary, said carefully, but we will always seek peace first. The council chamber filled with the sounds of multiple species discussing this in their own languages. Could hear the translation devices struggling to keep up. Clicks, whistles, growls, and sounds she had no name for blended together. Finally, the chief spoke. He was an ancient being called a, floating in a containment field that glowed with soft blue light. His voice was deep and seemed to come from everywhere at once. The Council has heard the request of humanity. We will now vote on membership status. The vote took less than 10 minutes. When it was done, the chief announced the result. By majority vote, humanity is granted conditional membership in the Galactic Council. However, Due to concerns about your species' military reliability, the following restrictions will apply. Human vessels may not carry weapons of war into Council space. Human military presence in joint territories will be limited to defensive forces numbering no more than 1,000 personnel. Human ships must submit to inspection at any Council checkpoint. These restrictions will remain in place until humanity demonstrates its commitment to collective security. Felt the words like a physical blow. She had expected some restrictions, but this was more severe than anything they had discussed. Behind her made a sound low in his throat. "We accept the Council's terms," said, because there was nothing else she could say. Humanity needed access to the wider galaxy. They needed the trade routes, the technology exchanges, the simple recognition that they were not alone. They would accept these restrictions and prove themselves over time. "Excellent," said, and his satisfaction was clear. "It is good to know that humanity understands its place. You will find that the Council values peace above all things. We do not glorify warriors or celebrate violence. We are civilized species who have moved beyond such primitive instincts." Wanted to tell him that there was nothing civilized about mistaking restraint for weakness. She wanted to explain that humans understood war better than any species in this chamber precisely because they had waged it so often and so brutally. She wanted to warn them that choosing not to fight was not the same as being unable to fight. But she said none of these things. She simply bowed her head in acceptance and thanked the Council for their consideration. As she turned to leave, fell into step beside her. His face was carefully blank, but she knew him well enough to see the anger beneath. "That was a mistake," he said quietly as they walked toward the exit. "They think we're weak." "I know," replied. "We should have shown them what we're capable of." That would have made things worse. They would have seen it as a threat. Was silent for a moment. Then he said, "One day they're going to need us. One day something is going to happen that their diplomacy and their debates can't handle. And when that day comes, they're going to realize they badly misjudged us." Did not answer. She hoped was wrong. She hoped that day would never come. They were almost to the exit when the alarm sounded. It was a deep, pulsing tone that had never heard before. Around the chamber, looked up in confusion and concern. The chief's voice echoed through the space. "We are receiving a distress signal from the Outer Rim territories. Multiple settlements are under attack. The signal identifies the attackers as raiders." Made a dismissive sound. "They are nothing but pirates. Local defense forces will handle them. There is no need for Council intervention." But saw's wings flutter with agitation. She saw other exchange worried glances, and she saw his expression change from anger to something else, something focused and alert. Said softly, "They aren't just pirates. Intelligence reports suggest they've been consolidating forces for months. If they're attacking openly now in Council territory, that means they think they can win." Looked back at the Council chamber, at the aliens who thought humanity feared war, at the who believed that diplomacy alone could solve any problem. She thought about his words. One day they're going to realize they badly misjudged us. Perhaps that day was coming sooner than any of them expected. 3 weeks after humanity's acceptance into the Galactic Council, Captain Hayes sat in the command chair of the Horizon's Edge and watched the news feeds with growing concern. The transport ship was 2 days from the nearest station, carrying a mixed cargo of supplies and 37 passengers. Most were human colonists heading to the outer territories, but 8 were aliens returning to there. "Captain, you should see this," Jacob Wells said from the engineering station. He transferred the feed to the main display. The Galactic News Network showed footage from another attacked colony. Buildings burned. Bodies lay in the streets. The reporter's voice shook as she described the scene. "This marks the 7th attack by forces in the past 10 days. Colonial defense forces have been overwhelmed at each location. The raiders take what they want and destroy the rest. Casualty estimates are in the thousands. The Galactic Council has yet to respond with military intervention. Muted the feed and rubbed her eyes. 7 attacks, 7 colonies destroyed or badly damaged, and the Council was still debating what to do about it. "How far are we from the nearest attack site?" she asked. Jacob checked his instruments. "About 40 light years. We're not in immediate danger, but they have been moving deeper into Council space with each raid. The pattern suggests they're testing defenses." "Or lack thereof," muttered. She had served in the Earth Defense Force before retiring to civilian transport work. She knew what it looked like when an enemy sensed weakness. There were predators, and they had found prey that would not fight back. On Earth, the news had caused widespread anger. Humans wanted to help. They wanted to send ships and personnel to protect the colonies, but the Council's restrictions prevented it. Human military vessels were banned from Council space. The 1,000 personnel allowed were spread thin across diplomatic posts, unable to mount any kind of coordinated response. Henderson had appeared on Earth broadcasts, her face tight with frustration, explaining that humanity's hands were tied. They had accepted the Council's terms. They could not break those terms without losing their membership entirely. Understood the political reality. But understanding it did not make it easier to watch people die while bureaucrats argued about procedure. The communications panel blinked. Jacob answered it, then his face went pale. "Captain, we're being hailed. It's a warship. They're demanding we stop and prepare for boarding." Was on her feet instantly. "Battle stations. All passengers to the safe rooms. Jacob, how fast can you get us to jump speed?" 10 minutes, maybe less, but they're already in weapons range. If we run, they'll fire." His mind raced. The Horizon's Edge was not a warship. It was a civilian transport with minimal defenses. The vessel on the sensors was 3 times their size and bristling with weapons. Running would get them killed. Fighting would get them killed faster. But surrendering was not an option either. She had heard what they did to their prisoners. "Open a channel," she said. The display showed a warrior. He was massive, covered in thick armor plates that looked like they were part of his body. His face was a nightmare of bone ridges and sharp teeth. When he spoke, his voice was a guttural snarl. "Human vessel, you will stop your engines. You will open your cargo holds. You will prepare your passengers for transfer. If you comply, some of you may survive. If you resist, all of you will die. You have 60 seconds to decide." Kept her voice steady. "What assurances do we have that you'll honor your word?" The laughed. It was an ugly sound. "You have no assurances. You have only the choice between certain death and possible survival. Choose quickly." The channel closed. Jacob looked at Captain. Thought about the 37 people on her ship. She thought about the colonists who had trusted her to get them safely to their new homes. She thought about the alien passengers who had chosen to travel with humans because they believed humans were peaceful and safe. She thought about something had said during her time in the Earth Defense Force. The Admiral had been teaching a class on tactical decision-making. A young officer had asked him what to do when all options were bad. Had looked at the officer and said, "You choose the option that lets you keep fighting, because as long as you're still fighting, you have a chance." Jacob said quietly, "The mining equipment in cargo hold 3. How long would it take to modify it?" Jacob's eyes widened. "Captain, that equipment is not designed for combat use." "I didn't ask what it was designed for. I asked how long it would take to modify it." Jacob's fingers flew over his console. The drilling lasers could be overcharged and redirected through the hull ports. The explosive charges for asteroid mining could be fitted with proximity detonators. The magnetic clamps could be reversed to create a repulsion field. But Captain, even with all that, we're not going to beat a warship. "We don't need to beat them," said. "We just need to make them decide we're not worth the trouble." "How long?" 5 minutes, maybe 4 if I don't worry about safety protocols." "Then don't worry about safety protocols. I'll buy you the time." opened the channel again. The warrior appeared, his expression annoyed. "I'm considering your offer," said, "but I need to understand the terms. What exactly do you want from our cargo? What will happen to the passengers? I need details before I can make this decision." The warrior's eyes narrowed. "You stall for time. I'm trying to make sure my people survive. Surely you can understand the need for careful negotiation." The warrior studied her for a long moment. Then he laughed again. "Very well, I will explain. Your cargo holds food, medical supplies, and construction materials. We will take all of it. Your passengers will be evaluated. Those with useful skills will be sold as labor. Those without will be killed. You personally will be kept alive to pilot the ship, as do not waste time learning to operate inferior human technology. Is this explanation sufficient?" Felt cold rage settle over her. She had dealt with pirates before. She had faced raiders and smugglers and all manner of criminals. But this casual description of murder and slavery was something else entirely. "I see," she said calmly. "Thank you for your honesty. I have one more question. What happens if I say no?" The warrior's smile showed too many teeth. "Then I destroy your ship and move on to easier prey. There are many human vessels in Council space now. You are all restricted from carrying weapons. You are all easy targets." "I understand," said. "Give me 1 minute to inform my crew of my decision." She closed the channel before the warrior could respond. "Jacob, please tell me you're ready." Drilling lasers are online and aimed. Explosive charges are set. Repulsion field is charged. "Captain, I have to warn you that if we fire the lasers at full overcharge, they're going to burn out after one shot. The explosives might damage our own hull, and the repulsion field will drain our power reserves completely. So we get one chance." "One chance," Jacob confirmed. Pulled up the tactical display. The ship was holding position 2,000 meters away, confident that its prey was helpless. She studied its configuration, looking for weak points. There, near the engine section, where the armor was thinner to allow for heat dissipation. "All hands brace for combat maneuvers," announced over the channel. "Passengers, stay in the safe rooms and hold on to something." She opened the channel to the one last time. "I've made my decision," she said. The warrior leaned forward eagerly, and "The answer is no." She closed the channel and activated every modified weapon Jacob had prepared. The drilling lasers fired at maximum overcharge, burning through space in concentrated beams of energy. The explosive charges launched from the cargo hold, their proximity detonators armed and active. The repulsion field activated, pushing the horizon's edge away from the ship at dangerous speed. The lasers hit first, punching through the thinner armor near the engines. The explosives hit seconds later, detonating in a chain reaction that tore through the damaged section. The ship's engines exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The horizon's edge shook violently as the repulsion field overloaded. Sparks flew from every console. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency illumination. But they were moving. They were accelerating away from the crippled vessel. "Jacob's status report," called out. "Engines are online, shields are down, weapons are completely burned out, power at 30%. But we're alive, Captain, we're alive and moving." Allowed herself a single moment of relief. Then she opened the channel again. "All passengers, we are safe for now. Medical teams to the cargo hold. Engineering teams to damage control. We have a long way to go, and I need everyone working together." She sat back in her chair and pulled up the communications array. They needed to send a message. They needed to warn other ships. They needed to tell the Council what was really happening out here. But as she prepared the message, another thought occurred to her. The warrior had said something important. He had said they were targeting human ships because humans were restricted from carrying weapons, because humans were seen as easy prey. The Council had made them weak in the eyes of predators, and now people were paying the price for that mistake. began recording her message to Council headquarters. She described the attack. She described how they had survived using improvised weapons. She described the warriors' casual dismissal of human defenses. And then she added one more thing. "They are not going to stop," she said into the recorder. "They see weakness and they're exploiting it. The Council needs to authorize real defenses, not debates, not negotiations, real military action, because if you don't, more people are going to die. And eventually, they are going to realize that attacking individual ships is inefficient. They're going to go after bigger targets." She sent the message and hoped someone would listen. The emergency council session had been going for 6 hours, and Henderson could see that they were no closer to a decision than when they started. Around the circular chamber, representatives argued with each other while staff members rushed back and forth with updated casualty reports. The numbers were staggering. 14 colonies attacked, 23 ships destroyed or captured, an estimated 50,000 dead, and the showed no signs of stopping. "We must negotiate," was saying, his voice rising above the others. "Send an envoy, offer them tribute. Surely we can reach an accommodation that does not require violence." Bit back her response. She had been trying to remain diplomatic, but her patience was wearing thin. Stood behind her, his presence a steady reminder that not everyone on Earth was willing to watch this disaster unfold without acting. Wings fluttered with agitation. Negotiate with what leverage? They have attacked with impunity. They know we will not fight back. What reason do they have to negotiate fairly? "Because we are reasonable beings," insisted. "Because civilized species can find common ground. Because warfare is the refuge of the primitive and the desperate." Made a sound that might have been a laugh or a snort of contempt. Shot him a warning glance. The chief's voice boomed through the chamber. "Order. We will have order. The Defense Committee has prepared a report on our current military capabilities. Please present your findings." A four-armed being stepped forward, holding multiple data tablets. His voice was flat and defeated before he even began. "Our analysis shows that combined Council defense forces number approximately 12,000 ships spread across 43 member systems. However, most of these ships are designed for patrol and customs enforcement, not combat. Our crews have minimal combat training. Coordination between different species forces has never been tested under actual warfare conditions. Based on intelligence reports, the Horde now numbers at least 8,000 warships with experienced combat crews. They also possess superior weapons technology stolen from various sources over the past century." Silence filled the chamber. "What are our chances of defeating them in direct combat?" someone asked. Consulted his tablets. "Without significant preparation and training, our probability of victory is estimated at less than 30%. Casualty projections suggest we would lose half our forces even in a successful engagement." More silence. Then spoke again. "This confirms what I have been saying. We cannot fight them. We must negotiate." "They don't want to negotiate," said, unable to stay quiet any longer. "They want to conquer. They see an opportunity that they've probably been waiting for over a century. They see a council that talks about peace but cannot defend itself." Turned his cold, yellow eyes on her. "And what would you have us do, human? Become like them, become violent and brutal?" "I would have you become effective," replied. "There's a difference between seeking peace and refusing to fight. They don't understand diplomacy. They understand strength, and right now you're showing them weakness." Easy words from a species that fears war so much they dismantled their own military. Shot back. Stepped forward, did not stop him this time. "We didn't dismantle our military," the Admiral said quietly. "We reduced it. There's a difference. And we didn't do it out of fear. We did it because we learned what war costs, but we never forgot how to fight. We just chose not to unless we had to." "Chose," said mockingly, "or lost the courage." Smile was cold. In the past century, while you've been debating and negotiating, humanity has fought three separate conflicts that you probably don't even know about. We put down a rebellion on Mars that would have killed millions. We stopped a corporate war in the asteroid belt that threatened Earth's resource supply. We defended our colony from raiders twice. We didn't advertise these conflicts because we handled them quietly and efficiently. That's not fear, that's experience. Opened his mouth to respond, but spoke first. Is this true, Ambassador Henderson? Nodded. Yes. We maintain a smaller military than we once did, but we keep it trained and ready. Admiral commands the Earth Defense Fleet. We have approximately 800 ships and 20,000 personnel. Not a large force by galactic standards, but a professional one. His multifaceted eyes studied intently. And yet you presented yourselves as peaceful. Why? Because we are peaceful, said. We prefer trade to war. We prefer cooperation to conflict. But that doesn't mean we're helpless. It means we choose our battles carefully. The chief's voice echoed through the chamber. Ambassador Henderson, are you suggesting that humanity could assist with the current crisis? Before could answer, interrupted. Absolutely not. We cannot trust a species that hid their true military capabilities. How do we know they won't use this crisis as an excuse to take control of the Council? Because that's not how we operate, said, struggling to keep her voice level. We don't want to control anyone. We want to help. Pretty words again, said. But actions speak louder. If humanity truly wanted to help, why did you accept our military restrictions without protest? Why did you allow us to limit your forces? Because we believed in giving diplomacy a chance, replied. Because we thought that by showing restraint, we could build trust. But the restrictions you placed on us have consequences. They send a message to predators like They say that humans are weak and easy targets, and now people are dying because of that message. The chamber erupted in angry debate. Some defended the restrictions. Others questioned them. A few began to acknowledge that perhaps humanity had been misjudged. Looked at, he nodded slightly. It was time. I have a proposal, said loudly, cutting through the noise. The chief called for silence. Speak, Ambassador. Grant humanity emergency authorization to deploy our defense fleet. Remove the restrictions temporarily. Allow us to coordinate with Council forces to mount an effective defense. We don't want control. We don't want territory. We just want to stop the killing. And if we refuse, demanded. Answered that question. Then more people die, more colonies fall. And eventually we'll realize that individual targets are inefficient. They'll go after something bigger, something central, something like this station. A ripple of fear went through the Council. You're trying to frighten us, said. I'm trying to prepare you, replied. They have been testing your defenses for weeks. Every attack has been bolder than the last. Every response has been slower and weaker. They're learning. And what they've learned is that the Council is paralyzed by bureaucracy and fear. How long do you think it'll be before they realize they can strike at the heart of the Council itself? That's absurd, said, but his voice lacked conviction. I wish to share something with the Council. Over the past weeks, I have been studying human history more thoroughly. I have read their accounts of warfare. I have reviewed their military doctrine, and I have reached a conclusion that I believe is important. She turned her gaze on the assembled. Humanity did not fear war. They learned from it. There is a difference between a species that has never fought and a species that has fought too much and learned its true cost. The former has no understanding of violence and no tools to combat it. The latter has both understanding and tools, but chooses to use them sparingly. When we restricted humanity's military presence, we did not make them weak. We simply prevented them from helping us when we needed it most. Scales rattled with anger. You would trust them based on words and records. You would give them power over Council security. I would trust them based on results, said calmly. Captain Hayes and the crew of the Horizon's Edge defeated a warship using nothing but mining equipment. They improvised weapons in minutes and drove off attackers that we assumed were invincible. If one human cargo ship can do that, imagine what their actual military could accomplish. Felt a surge of hope. Finally, someone understood. The chief was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. The council will vote on emergency authorization, all in favor of temporarily removing military restrictions on humanity and allowing Earth Defense Forces to coordinate council security operations. Signal your approval. The vote was not unanimous, and several others voted against it. But when the count was finished, the majority had approved. The motion passes, the chief announced. Ambassador Henderson, humanity is hereby granted emergency powers to defend council interests. All restrictions on military deployment are temporarily lifted. You will have full access to council resources and intelligence. Coordinate with on integration of allied forces. Felt relief and dread in equal measure. They had won the authorization, but now they had to prove they could use it effectively. Was already pulling up tactical displays on his personal device. "How long until the Earth fleet can arrive?" asked him quietly. 48 hours, replied. "I ordered them to standby positions 3 days ago when the attacks started getting worse. I figured we'd eventually get authorization or things would get bad enough that authorization wouldn't matter." "You anticipated this." "I've been a soldier for 30 years. I know what it looks like when diplomatic solutions aren't going to work. I also know what it looks like when predators find easy prey." Wanted to ask him more, but an alarm cut through the chamber. The same deep, pulsing tone that had sounded 3 weeks ago when the first attacks began. But this time it was louder, more urgent. The chief's aide rushed to his side and whispered frantically. The ancient's glow dimmed with shock. He said, his voice heavy, "We have just received a transmission from the Horde. They are demanding unconditional surrender of the Council Station and all surrounding territories. If we refuse, they will attack in 72 hours. Their fleet is already on approach. Intelligence estimates they are bringing their full force, over 7,000 ships." The chamber erupted in panic, shouted. Staff members ran, stood frozen, his earlier bravado completely gone. "Looked at 72 hours. That gives me about 24 hours after the fleet arrives to prepare defenses and coordinate with whatever council forces are willing to fight. It's going to be close." "Can we win?" asked. His expression was grim. "I don't know, but I know we're going to try, because that's what humans do. When someone threatens innocent people, when bullies think they can take whatever they want, we stand up. Even if the odds are bad, even if we might lose, we stand up." Nodded. "Then we'd better get started." As the council chamber descended into chaos around them and began the work of preparing for war. The council had spent weeks debating while people died. Now they had 3 days to build a defense that could save millions more. It would not be easy. It might not even be possible. But humanity had faced impossible odds before, and they had learned something that the council was only now beginning to understand. Sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be ready for war. Admiral stood on the command deck of the EDS Columbia and watched the tactical display with the calm focus that came from 3 decades of military service. Around him, officers from a dozen different species worked at their stations, coordinating the defense of the council station. 23 hours had passed since the ultimatum. The Earth Defense Fleet had arrived on schedule, 800 ships ranging from massive carriers to quick-strike fighters. Had spent every minute since then integrating them with willing council forces, planning defensive positions, and trying to teach alien commanders the basics of coordinated warfare. It had not been easy. Most of the council species had no real combat experience. Their idea of military action was border patrol and anti-piracy operations. They had never faced a real invasion fleet. They had never coordinated complex battle maneuvers. Many of them did not even understand basic tactical concepts. But they were trying, that was something. Admiral, we're detecting the fleet at the edge of sensor range. Lieutenant Commander Jason Cole reported from the tactical station. Jason was young but sharp, one of the best fighter pilots in the fleet, had put him in charge of coordinating all strike craft operations. Estimated arrival time is 18 minutes. Ship count 7,200 confirmed, probably more we can't detect yet. They're coming in heavy formation, no attempt at stealth. Was not surprised. They expected an easy victory. They had overwhelmed every defense they encountered for the past month. They had no reason to think this would be different. They were about to learn otherwise. All ships battle stations, ordered. Execute defensive formation Delta 7. Strike wings to launch positions. Capital ships to primary firing lines. Support vessels to secondary positions. Move with precision. No wasted motion. The fleet began to shift. 800 human ships moved into position with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this. Every captain knew their role. Every crew knew their task. There was no confusion, no hesitation. The Council forces were less organized. Ships moved slowly, uncertain of their positions. Some captains questioned their assignments. Others asked for clarification on basic maneuvers. Observing from the command deck, watched the contrast with obvious concern. Admiral, will the Allied forces be ready in time? Studied the display. They'll have to be. Jason, status on Allied integration. It's rough, sir. The cruisers are holding formation well. The frigates are struggling with coordination. The defense platforms are in position, but their targeting systems are incompatible with ours. We're running manual links through our own computers. Make it work, said, and keep them away from primary engagement zones until they're ready. I'd rather have them as backup than liabilities. Yes, sir. Henderson appeared on the communication screen from the Council station. They are evacuating to the deep shelters. Left an hour ago. Most of the others are following. Only and a few others are staying to coordinate with you. Nodded, smart move. If things go wrong, we'll need Council leadership intact. How are the civilians? Evacuation is 70% complete. We're running out of time. You have 18 minutes, make them count. His expression was tight with worry. Can we actually win this? Considered the question. They had numbers, they had experience, they had momentum, but they also had assumptions. They assumed the Council would fight like the Council had always fought, with hesitation, confusion, and fear. They did not know that humanity was now coordinating the defense. They did not know that 800 human ships represented more combat power than most species possessed in their entire fleet. They did not know that humans had spent a century reducing their military not out of fear, but out of choice, and that choice meant every ship, every weapon, every soldier was maintained at peak effectiveness. We have a chance, said. That's all any soldier can ask for. That's not very reassuring. I'm a soldier, not a motivational speaker. Trust me to do my job, I'll trust you to do yours. The connection closed, turned back to the tactical display. 15 minutes until contact, Jason reported. Strike wings are launched and holding in ready positions. All human ships report battle ready. Allied forces are at 85% readiness. It'll have to be enough. Transmit final tactical orders to all captains. Weapons free on my command only. No one fires until I give the word. I want them close. The bridge was silent except for the quiet sounds of systems operating and officers coordinating. Could feel the tension, but it was controlled tension, professional tension. These were people who had trained for this moment even if they hoped it would never come. The minutes ticked by. At 10 minutes, long-range sensors began picking up detailed scans of the fleet. They were massive, heavily armed, and arranged in a blunt force formation designed to overwhelm through sheer firepower. No finesse, no tactics, just raw aggression. At 5 minutes, they opened a communication channel. Warlord appeared on the display. He was even more imposing than the warrior Hayes had faced, covered in battle scars and ceremonial armor. "Attention, Council Station," his voice boomed through the speakers. "You have ignored our ultimatum. You have chosen destruction. We are the Horde. We have conquered 100 worlds. We have destroyed 1,000 fleets. You cannot stop us. Surrender now and some of you will survive as slaves. Resist and all of you will die." Opened a response channel. "This is Admiral of the Earth Defense Fleet. I'm in command of the station's defense. Your surrender demand is, turn your ships around and leave Council space. This is your only warning." Stared at the screen for a moment, then laughed. It was the same ugly, mocking sound that the warrior had made before attacking ship. "Humans, the Council's frightened children. You barely have 1,000 ships. We have 7,000. You have no chance. But I admire your courage, even if it is foolish. When we capture you, I will make your death quick as a reward for your bravery." "You'll have to catch me first," said, and closed the channel. 2 minutes to optimal firing range, Jason reported. Watched the fleet advance. They showed no caution, no tactical sophistication. They expected to simply crush the defenders through overwhelming force. "All ships hold formation. Hold fire, wait for it." The fleet crossed into long-range weapons distance. Officers tensed, but he did not give the order. The fleet crossed into medium range, still waited. "Admiral, they're in optimal firing range," Jason said, his voice tight. "Not yet." The fleet continued to advance, picking up speed. They were confident now. They thought the defenders were frozen with fear. "Now," said quietly, "all ships weapons free. Execute attack pattern Omega-3. The space around the Council Station erupted with weapons fire. But it was not the desperate, scattered shooting they expected. It was coordinated, devastating, and precise. Human ships had been positioned to create overlapping fields of fire. Every vessel that entered the killing zone found itself targeted by multiple ships simultaneously. Their shields collapsed under concentrated barrages. Their armor was torn apart by precisely aimed weapons. The strike wings, led by Jason Cole's fighter squadron, cut through the formation like knives. They did not engage in dogfights or individual duels. They moved in coordinated groups, targeting weak points and command ships, disrupting the enemy's ability to coordinate their attack. The capital ships fired in timed volleys, allowing shields to recharge between shots while maintaining constant pressure. Their captains did not panic or break formation. They trusted their orders and executed them perfectly. The Council ships, inspired by the human example and guided by direct communication links, began to find their courage. The cruisers moved into supporting positions and added their firepower to the human volleys. The frigates, realizing they could actually hurt the enemy, pressed their attacks with growing confidence. The fleet, expecting an easy victory, instead found itself in a battle it was not prepared for. Their loose formation collapsed under the precise human assault. Ships collided as they tried to maneuver away from danger. Orders conflicted as warlords shouted contradictory commands. "Enemy casualties mounting," Jason reported. "We've destroyed or disabled over 300 ships in the first engagement. Our losses are minimal. 17 human ships with damage, mostly shields and minor hull breaches. Allied forces report 23 ships with heavy damage but still operational." Nodded, the first phase had gone exactly as planned, but they had numbers, they would adapt, they would regroup. "All ships execute maneuver pattern Beta 5. Strike wings, hit their command vessels. Capital ships maintain defensive formation but prepare for close engagement." The battle continued. For 2 hours, the space around the Council Station was lit by weapons fire and exploding ships. They threw themselves at the defenders with desperate fury, but desperation was not the same as skill. Human ships moved with purpose. When damaged, they fell back to repair while others took their position. When threatened, they supported each other with covering fire. When opportunities appeared, they exploited them ruthlessly. Watch it all with professional detachment. This was what humanity had learned through centuries of warfare. This was what happened when you took war seriously, studied it carefully, and executed it professionally. Not glory, not honor, just cold, efficient destruction of those who threatened innocence. On the display, Warlord's flagship tried to break through to the station. It was a massive vessel, heavily armored and bristling with weapons. It had probably destroyed dozens of worlds. Jason, focus all strike wings on that flagship. I want it disabled. Yes, sir. The fighter squadrons swarmed the flagship like insects attacking a much larger predator. But these insects had stingers made of plasma and missiles. They targeted the ship's weapons systems, its engines, its shield generators. They did not try to destroy it outright. They tried to cripple it. It worked. Within 10 minutes, the flagship was drifting, its weapons offline, its shields down, its engines dead. Opened a channel 2. The warlord appeared on the screen, his face bloodied and his armor cracked. Your fleet is beaten, said calmly. You've lost over 2,000 ships. Your formation is broken. Your command structure is collapsing. Surrender now and I'll allow your remaining forces to retreat. Continue fighting and I'll destroy every last vessel. Stared at him with hatred and disbelief. How did humans do this? You are supposed to be weak. You are supposed to fear war. We don't fear war, said. We understand it. There's a difference. War is not about anger or aggression or proving your strength. It's about achieving objectives with minimum necessary force. You came here expecting frightened prey. You found professional soldiers instead. That was your mistake. His expression shifted from anger to something like understanding, and then to fear. You will let us go, he asked. If you leave now and never return to Council space, yes. If you try to regroup and attack again, I will hunt down every ship in your fleet and destroy it. That's not a threat. That's a promise. For a long moment was silent. Then he nodded slowly. The Horde withdraws, he said. You have one human, may we never meet again. The surviving ships turned and retreated into the darkness of space. Watched them go, tracking their course to make sure they kept moving away. Cease fire, he ordered. All ships begin damage assessment and casualty reports. Strike wings, return to your carriers. Someone get me a channel to the Council station. Appeared on the screen, her face showing relief and exhaustion. We monitored the entire battle. That was incredible. That was necessary, corrected. How are the civilians? Safe, all evacuations are complete. No casualties on the station itself. Good, I'll send damage control teams to help with repairs. And yes, you might want to call an emergency council session. I think we need to have a conversation about how galactic security is going to work from now on. Smiled slightly. I think you're right. Yeah. Thank you. You saved millions of lives today. Shook his head. I did my job. That's all any soldier can do. 5 days after the battle, the Galactic Council reconvened in their restored chamber. The dome still showed some damage from stray weapons fire, but repair crews had worked around the clock to make the space functional again. The real damage was to the Council's pride and their understanding of the galaxy. Henderson stood in the center of the chamber once more, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. The who had dismissed humanity now watched her with respect, and in some cases, fear. The who had supported humanity looked vindicated, and the empty seats Ware and his allies had sat served as a reminder that cowardice had consequences. The chief spoke first. Ambassador Henderson, the Council wishes to formally thank humanity for its defense of this station and the member worlds. Our preliminary casualty assessment shows that your intervention saved an estimated 4 million lives. The Council owes Earth a debt that cannot easily be repaid. Bowed her head slightly. Humanity does not seek payment. We sought only to protect innocent people from aggression. That is what civilized species should do for each other. Spoke next. The battle revealed many truths that this council had been avoiding. We claimed to value peace, but we had no understanding of what peace truly requires. We restricted humanity's military presence out of fear and misunderstanding. We nearly paid for that mistake with our lives. The restrictions were based on incomplete information, said diplomatically. Humanity could have been more forthcoming about our capabilities. We share some responsibility for the misunderstanding. No, said firmly. You presented yourselves as peaceful because you are peaceful. We chose to interpret that as weakness because it fit our own comfortable narratives. We convinced ourselves that those who speak of peace must fear conflict, when the truth is far more complex. The chief nodded. Indeed, Admiral's after-action report has been distributed to all. His tactical analysis and casualty breakdown show a level of military sophistication that we had not imagined possible. Would you be willing to explain, Ambassador, how humanity developed such capabilities while maintaining your commitment to peace? Thought about how to phrase this. It was the question at the heart of everything that had happened. Humanity did not develop these capabilities recently, she began. We have been fighting wars for our entire history. Thousands of years of constant conflict taught us many things. We learned tactics. We learned strategy. We learned how to organize, coordinate, and execute military operations with devastating efficiency. She paused, making sure everyone was listening. But we also learned what war costs. We learned that every battle leaves scars. We learned that victory in war is rarely as valuable as peace. We learned that the strongest warrior is not the one who fights the most, but the one who knows when fighting is truly necessary and when it is not. So you chose to reduce your military forces, the chief said. We chose to maintain only what we needed, corrected. We kept our soldiers professional and our equipment functional. We trained constantly. We studied military history and learned from past mistakes. But we did not expand our forces or seek conflicts. We focused on defense, not conquest. We focused on being ready if needed, not looking for opportunities to use our strength. Leaned forward. And this is why you accepted our restrictions without protest, because you knew that even with reduced forces, you could defend yourselves if necessary. Partly, admitted, but also because we genuinely wanted to give peace a chance. We wanted to show the Council that humanity could be trusted. We thought that by accepting restrictions, we could build that trust over time. A noble intention, the chief said, but one that nearly resulted in catastrophe. The restrictions sent the wrong message to predators like the. They saw weakness where there was only restraint. Yes, agreed. That is a lesson we have all learned. Peace requires more than good intentions. It requires the willingness and capability to defend those intentions against those who would exploit them. A new voice spoke up. It was a species that had not interacted with much before. Admiral's report recommends significant changes to Council security structure. He proposes a unified military command, mandatory combat training for all defense forces, and regular joint exercises between member species. These recommendations essentially give humanity control over Council military operations. How can we be certain this is not an attempt to seize power? It was a fair question, and had expected it. You cannot be certain, she said bluntly. You can only judge us by our actions. Humanity could have refused to help unless the Council granted us permanent authority. We did not. We could have used the battle as leverage to extract concessions. We did not. We could have allowed to damage the station before intervening, making you more desperate and willing to accept our terms. We did not. She let that sink in. What we did was simple. When people needed help, we helped them. When innocents were threatened, we defended them. When the Council needed military expertise, we provided it. We ask nothing in return except the chance to continue doing what we believe is right. studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. A fair answer. I will support the Admiral's recommendations. Other added their agreement. The vote, when it came, was overwhelming. The Council approved the formation of a unified military command structure with Admiral as the first commanding general of Allied defense forces. Humanity would provide the core expertise and training, but all member species would contribute forces and personnel. The restrictions on human military presence were permanently removed. Humanity was granted full member status without conditions. But more important than the formal changes was the shift in understanding. The Council had learned that peace was not the same as weakness, and strength was not the same as aggression. 6 months later, stood in the same chamber for a very different ceremony. Around her, representatives from all member species had gathered, along with military personnel from the newly formed Allied defense forces. The diversity was striking. Humans in their neat uniforms stood next to warriors and reptilian soldiers, species that had never worked together before now trained side by side. At the center of the chamber, workers unveiled a monument. It was a sculpture showing figures from different species standing together, hands and appendages joined in unity. The inscription beneath it read in multiple languages, "Peace is not the absence of capability, but the wisdom to use it justly." Stood beside, wearing his formal uniform. He looked uncomfortable with all the attention, but accepted it with his usual stoic grace. "How does it feel to be the most famous human in the galaxy?" asked quietly. "Overrated," replied. "I'd rather be back on Earth fishing." "You could retire, you've earned it." Shook his head. "Not yet. Too much work to do. We've got 20 different species learning human tactical doctrine. Half of them still think war is about honor and glory. The other half think it's about proving their courage. Nobody except us seems to understand that war is just a tool, and like any tool, it should be used carefully and only when necessary." "They'll learn," said. "You'll teach them." "We'll teach them," corrected. "This isn't just about humanity anymore. It's about building something that works, something that can actually keep peace instead of just talking about it." The ceremony continued. Species leaders gave speeches praising humanity's courage and skill. They talked about the new era of cooperation and security. They promised that the Council would never again be caught unprepared. Listened to it all with mixed feelings. She was glad that humanity was accepted and respected. She was glad that the Council was taking security seriously, but she knew that the real test was still to come. They had been driven off, but they were not destroyed. They would regroup. They would rebuild. And there were other threats out there, other predators watching to see if the Council's newfound strength was real or temporary. After the ceremony, and met with in a private chamber, they had become humanity's closest ally and strongest supporter on the Council. "I have news," said. "Our intelligence services have been tracking the retreat. They have returned to their home territories and appear to be consolidating rather than preparing for another attack. However, we have also detected increased activity from other pirate groups and rogue states. They are watching to see how the Council responds to future challenges." "They're testing us," said, "seeing if the victory over the was a fluke or if we're genuinely capable now." "Precisely," agreed. "Which is why I wanted to discuss the Admiral's proposal for extending military outreach to former territories." Pulled up a tactical display. They controlled about 30 systems before their defeat. Most of those worlds are populated by species they conquered and enslaved. If we can help those worlds establish legitimate governments and defense forces, we create a buffer zone and demonstrate that the Council's new approach is about liberation, not conquest. Studied the display. It's ambitious. It would require a significant commitment of resources and personnel. "It would," agreed. "But it's the right thing to do, and strategically it's smart. We turn enemy territory into Allied space. We show other potential aggressors that attacking the Council has consequences beyond just military defeat. Wings fluttered with what had learned was a sign of approval. I will present this proposal to the Security Committee. With your victory still fresh in their minds, I believe they will approve it. Over the following months, the plan was implemented. Human ships, accompanied by Allied forces, moved into former space. They found worlds devastated by decades of brutal occupation. They found populations traumatized and suspicious. They found a civilization that had been built entirely on violence and exploitation. Captain Hayes, promoted to Commodore after her actions against the raiders, led the humanitarian mission. She coordinated relief efforts, helped establish new governments, and worked to rebuild infrastructure that had been destroyed or neglected. Jacob Wells, her former engineer, now served as a technical advisor, helping former pirate worlds transition their economies from raiding to legitimate trade. He taught them how to maintain their own equipment, how to build instead of steal, how to create value instead of taking it. It was slow, difficult work. Many of the former populations did not trust the Council. They had been conquered by strong species before. Why should they believe the humans were different? The answer came not through words but through actions. When pirates attacked a recovering world, human and allied forces drove them off and then stayed to help rebuild. When a famine threatened a former colony, human ships brought food and medical supplies without demanding payment. When local governments struggled to establish order, human advisors provided training and support without trying to take control. Slowly, trust was built. Slowly, former enemies became allies. Slowly, a new model of galactic civilization began to take shape. One day, nearly a year after the battle, Jacob was working at a reconstruction site on a world that had been a military base. The population was mostly children of warriors who had known nothing but violence their entire lives. A young alien child, maybe 8 years old in human terms, approached him. She watched him work on a water purification system for several minutes before speaking. "Why did you come here?" she asked in broken Common. Jacob looked up from his work. "To help." "But we attacked your people." "You didn't attack anyone," Jacob said gently. "You're a child, and even the adults here are victims as much as they were perpetrators. The leadership created a society based on violence because it benefited them. Regular people like you just got caught up in it." The girl thought about this. "The humans who came before you, they fought our warriors, they won, but then they stayed and helped us. Why?" Jacob smiled. "Because we remember when someone needed to teach us there was a better way. We spent thousands of years fighting each other before we figured out that cooperation works better than conflict. We made a lot of mistakes. We hurt a lot of people, but eventually we learned. And now we're trying to share that lesson." "You are teaching us not to fight." "No," Jacob said. "We're teaching you when to fight and when not to fight. Sometimes fighting is necessary. Sometimes you need to defend yourself or protect others. But fighting should never be your first choice. It should be what you do when everything else has failed." The girl nodded slowly, processing this new idea. Then she asked one more question. "Do you think we can be like you, peaceful but strong?" Jacob looked at her, this child of warriors who was asking about peace, and felt hope for the future. "I think you can be better than us," he said, "because you have the chance to learn from our mistakes instead of making them yourselves. That's a gift. Use it well." Back on Earth, in a quiet office overlooking the Pacific Ocean, Henderson reviewed reports from across the galaxy. The Council was stronger than it had ever been. Military training was standardized and effective. Response times to threats had improved dramatically. Member species were cooperating in ways that had seemed impossible just a year before. But the work was not done. It would never be done. Peace was not something you achieved once and kept forever. It was something you had to maintain constantly, defend carefully, and build deliberately. Her communicator blinked with an incoming message from. She opened it and saw his face on the screen. "We've got a situation developing in the Outer Rim. Looks like some rogue military group is threatening 3 colonies. The local forces are requesting assistance." Felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle over her. "What do you need?" "Permission to deploy 2 battle groups. Should be able to handle it without much trouble, but I wanted to check with you first. Make sure the Council is comfortable with us taking independent action." Thought about the Council that had existed a year ago. The Council that debated while people died. The Council that feared taking action more than they feared the consequences of inaction. That Council was gone. In its place was something new, something better, something that understood that protecting peace required strength, wisdom, and the willingness to act when action was needed. "You have my authorization," said. "Go protect those people. That's what we do now." Nodded. "That's what we've always done. The galaxy is just finally noticing." The screen went dark, sat back in her chair and looked out at the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. She thought about everything that had happened, about the Council's initial dismissal of humanity, about the attack, about the battle that changed everything, about the new reality they were all living in now. The Council had claimed that humans feared war. They had been wrong. Humans understood war. They respected its power and its cost. They knew when it was necessary and when it was not. And that understanding, that wisdom earned through centuries of brutal experience, was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not their weapons, not their tactics, not their courage. Their wisdom. The wisdom to know that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the ability to protect. Not from the willingness to fight, but from the judgment to know when fighting was truly necessary. The wisdom to be both peaceful and strong, both restrained and capable, both merciful and effective. That was what humanity had learned. That was what they were teaching others. And that was what would shape the galaxy for generations to come. Smiled slightly and turned back to her work. There were always more reports to read, more situations to assess, more decisions to make. The work of peace was never finished, but it was good work, important work. And humanity, once dismissed as too fearful to matter, was now at the center of it all, not through conquest, not through domination, but through service. That thought was exactly how it should be.